Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Hannah Leggy, and I am the assistant principal at your school. And today's PD is going to be going over the backwards design process, which is planning with the end in mind. Um, some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not, but as educators, um, it's important for us to think about what our students' end goal is and plan in accordance with that end goal. And the benefits of that are more success when it comes to their scores because a lot of our kids and assessment is, a STAR test or an AP exam, depending on what you teach, or the TSI or the SAT. So when we plan with that in mind, we're able to encompass and spiral in what we need for them to be successful throughout the year. So, backwards design is basically instructional planning that prioritizes desired learnings and evidence of learning before planning teaching activities. So, when we think of backwards planning on the big grand scale, we think of those summative assessments like STAR test. But if you are able to create smaller evidences of learning and plan with those smaller evidences of learning, it starts to kind of build up. So student learning outcomes, it focuses on what students should know, understand, and be able to do. And we find that out based off of our TEKS, which is our Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So we're going to go over breaking down what breaking down a TEK looks like. And also alignment. This is more important than you may think, because from an administrator's view, when you walk into a classroom, you're looking for the objective to line up with what the lesson is, to line up with what the demonstration of learning is for that day or exit ticket. And it allows students to logically make those connections themselves in a way that's a little bit more natural, but also it helps whoever's walking in your room understand what's going on in your room a lot faster. So that alignment piece is essential because it ensures objectives, assessments, and instructional are logically connected. So why backwards design? So on top of all of the other reasons that I've already mentioned, it shifts the focus and it puts the learning on the student. So it focuses on what students learn, which is their output, rather than what we are doing, right? So when we talk about the teacher lifting slash student lifting pieces of a lesson, you can kind of see that through a gradual release model, right? So the you do, we do, or I do, we do, you do. And as we are going through that gradual release model, the lift of the teacher, lessens, and then the we do is together, and then the you do is the complete student lift. But it focuses on what the students are doing, and it puts the emphasis on their output, right? A lot of times when we're planning, we're thinking about what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? But it really switches that lens over to what is the student going to produce? So it prevents misalignment, and it ensures every activity serves a clear learning purpose and not just simply engagement. So like I said, that alignment kind of is as a teacher, your accountability partner, making sure that you and your lesson and like your different learning strategies are aligned to make sure that we have that end goal in mind of what our student success looks like. It also allows for a deeper understanding, not just on the student's part, but on the teacher's part as well. It's kind of a baseline for teachers to start. Um, um, oh my gosh, why am I blanking here? for teachers to start internalizing their lessons, right? You start with the objective and you go from there. Okay, what activities are we doing? What is our demonstration learning or exit ticket? What do I need to make sure that I emphasize in my lesson as I go through it? In the intentional planning piece. So we all know what it's like to be teachers. There are some days when you feel like, okay, I just need to put something together, because you feel a little bit flustered. But it's really important to focus on that intentional planning piece because it allows us to prepare for misconceptions and answer students' questions up front. So you're able to kind of give that purpose to the lesson so students feel more engaged. And not only that, they're going to be more engaged because you are like, I know this lesson backwards to forwards, forwards, backwards. And it helps with that internalizing piece. And of course, preparing for misconceptions, which is a big part of internalization. So backwards planning starts, there's 3 phases of it, okay? So stage 1 is to identify the desired results. So if you're planning a lesson and you start with a demonstration of learning at the end, which is your exit ticket, right? And you build your lesson based off of that exit ticket, the likelihood of your student success is going to be much higher. Okay, so determine acceptable evidence. So this piece, are you going to use a multiple choice exam? Are you going to use a writing piece? Is it an essay? Is it a test? What is acceptable evidence? Because we are looking for quality over quantity when it comes to those pieces of evidence. So it's important that we keep that in mind. And then stage 3, of course, plan the learning experience and instruction. So that's the actual piece where you're putting together your lesson, but you're planning with the end in mind. So let's look at stage 1. So on the right side of the screen is going to be a model lesson that is technically being backwards planned. And then on the left side is the desired results and questions that we are asking to kind of get those results. So as we're planning, we need to ask ourselves, what should students know, understand, and be able to do? Okay. What content is worthy of understanding? So this is where you as an instructor or teacher, your expertise comes into play. So if we're looking at the TEKS on the right side, it says analyze the author's purpose, audience, and message within a text. So that's 8A. Now, if you are in a 45-minute block and you are reading a very dense text, maybe one lesson, you're just analyzing the author's purpose. Okay, so that's when it say what content is worthy of understanding. Maybe that day we're doing author's purpose. Maybe the next day we're talking about audience, and maybe the following day we're talking about message within a text. So what enduring understandings are desired? So let's look at our objective on the right side. Students will be able to analyze how an author's purpose shapes the message and audience's perception with at least 80% accuracy. So the understanding that is desired here is author's purpose and message, as well as audience's perception. It's a pretty packed objective. So what are the established content standards? We are looking for that 80% accuracy piece. Okay. And if you have more content than time allows, you as an instructor, you need to take accountability and say, we're going to focus on this piece because A, B, and C. But that comes with the internalization piece, the backwards planning with the end in mind with your demonstration of learning or exit ticket. So this is an example of unpacking TEKS. So what I want you to do with your partner, I want you to choose a highly tested TEK in your subject area and unpack it. So what is the skill verb? What concept must students apply it to? And what Bloom's level does it demand? What prior knowledge do students need? Okay, so that's where we're covering misconceptions. What prior knowledge do students need? And then I have a sentence starter for you. My TEKS requires students to, in order to, and I also have an example at the bottom. So the TEKS is analyze the author's purpose, audience, and message within a text. The verb is to analyze. The concept is author's purpose, audience, and message. The Bloom's level is an analysis, which is it's a mid-level but higher order. And the prior knowledge needed is identifying author's purpose, understanding audience, and recognizing message. So it's never safe to assume that students know all of the prior knowledge. What I do is I create a warm-up, or a do now, that kind of covers what that prior knowledge need is. And then I check for understanding there, and I do a quick little, when I say quick, I mean like 2 minutes on making sure that they're aware of that. At this time, turn and talk with your partner, break down your TEK of choice. Okay, so let's move on to stage 2, acceptable evidence. So this is where the quality over quantity starts to kind of take precedent. So again, on the left, we're talking about how this will actually be applied to your classroom. And on the right, this is an example for author's purpose. This is a acceptable piece of evidence for the day. So here, we'll be using a short constructed response, and the prompt is identify the author's purpose and explain how it shapes the message using text evidence. Acceptable evidence is a clear claim, relevant text evidence, and explanation connecting the purpose to message and audience. So the alignment here is, it's an English class, so the writing is there, right? A short constructed response is definitely relevant for the star. But the clear claim, relevant evidence, and explanation are essential because that means they're able to identify the author's purpose, the message, and the audience effectively. So not all of us are English teachers. So on the left, let's talk about how that can be applied in other classrooms. So how will we know if students have achieved the desired results? So maybe for a math class, the demonstration of learning is a math problem at the end. Maybe for a science class, it's a paragraph explaining the process of something. But planning each lesson with that in mind is essential. So what will we accept as evidence of students' understanding? What multiple forms of evidence will we collect? And teachers must think like an assessor before designing lessons. So today for my English class, it is a short constructed response. The students will probably have 5 to 6 minutes to do it. Now, on another day, we need to do a multiple choice quiz on revising and editing. On another day, we need to do maybe a fill in the blank. But it's very important to collect multiple different pieces of evidence that have different formatting, because that gives us a better picture of if they're understanding the concept and they're just not able to write it down, or they're understanding how to do this but not this. So it's important that we have an array of options to choose from. But remember, quality over quantity. Okay, so here's a think, pair, share for you. What does mastery of a highly tested TEKS in your classroom look like? And if you're not a STAR tested subject, think about a TEK that is heavily emphasized in your curriculum. And what evidence convinces you that a student truly understands and not just recall the content? I want you to consider what would a multiple choice quiz be enough? What would a more meaningful assessment look like? So go ahead and turn and talk with your partner at this time. Okay, we're moving on to stage 3, which is the learning plan. So on the right side, we have the lesson example. Which is the gradual release model. It's the I do, we do, you do. And again, that's just an example for an English class. However, on the left side, there are key questions. And what that looks like is what enabling knowledge and skills will students need? What activities will develop these skills? What teaching methods best match the learning goals? And what materials and resources support the objectives? However, through this, I want you to think about what it means, the means to an end. So plan instruction only after identifying desired results and assessments. So again, this is specific for an English class, but when you are thinking about other subjects, you need to think about the end in mind and the skills that you are utilizing. What knowledge and skills will students need? What activities will develop these skills, and what teaching methods best match the learning goals? What materials and resources support the objectives? So again, this is starting with the end in mind, because it's going as deep as even knowing what resources these students are going to need. I realize that not every lesson is going to be the gradual release model. But this is a vast majority. So whenever you're looking for that mastery show, you're going to have that done during the you do piece, which is the independent response and independent practice. So let's take a deeper look at what alignment really means. So the TEKS are the standards that define our expected learning outcomes. And this is defined by the state of Texas. And this assists teachers in their curriculum. So the objective is clear targets derived directly from TEKS and standards. Your assessments measures designed to reflect the objective precisely. And of course, your instruction, your teaching plan to achieve the assessed objective. So it's all connected, and it needs to maintain connection throughout your instruction, or else students will become a little confused, and people who are walking in your room will also be a little confused about what's really going on. So again, we're looking at the benefits here. So the clear instructional focus, every lesson activity and resource serves as a specific purpose and aligned learning tool. The strong alignment, TEKS objectives, assessment, and instruction all point to the same target. And increased rigor, focus on enduring understanding and higher order thinking rather than coverage and recall. And if you are internalizing a lesson this deeply, you should be able to scaffold up for our high achievers and scaffold down very easily for our kiddos that need that little extra help. Because as you are internalizing the lesson and planning it, you'll be able to see where sentence stems might be helpful, or I know the student would answer this question quickly. Let's put an extension on there. And then this will also assist and improve student outcomes. So students achieve better results and understand the purpose of their learning through this. So right now I want you to do a think, pair, share. Think about a unit or lesson you currently teach. How might you redesign it using backwards design? Start with, I want my students to understand blank. I know this was a lot of information, but I want to look at some key takeaways. So you need to start with the end in mind. Identify desired results before planning instruction. Think like an assessor. And determine evidence of learning before designing lessons. So when I remember at the beginning of this PD, I was talking about how the desired outcome is like the STAR test. But as you're planning throughout the year, you need to be thinking about those demonstrations of learning, and then making sure that those demonstrations of learning are part of like the highly tested TEKS on the STAR test, or are part of the highly tested, AP seminar, or AP US history. So making sure that that alignment piece is there for your demonstrations of learning, and that will allow you to plan accordingly. So your lessons are always relevant for the students. Align everything. TEKS objective assessment and instruction must all connect. Prioritize depth over coverage. Focus on enduring understandings, not just content. I can't count how many times I've walked into a classroom and they're like, we just need to get through this, right? So let's not do that. Let's prioritize depth. And then teaching is a means to an end, and every activity should serve a clear learning purpose. And through identifying the clear learning purpose for you all as teachers, the students will have a clear learning purpose as well. So I love this quote from Wiggins and McTeague. Assessment is where the rubber meets the road. It drives curricular coherence and reliable evaluation. So starting with the end in mind is a great way to ensure that your instruction is clear, aligned, and well-purposed. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great day. Bye.